All right, welcome everyone to another great episode of Talk to Tatiana. And today, Rick Ornelas is talking to Tatiana. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. It's a pleasure to have you. I think you have an interesting story to share. And I wanted to start, I guess, with where you are today. What do you do? How do you transform other people's lives?
Good question, because that's my favorite thing to do. Really, is I identify as an ultimate success coach. I'm also a best-selling author and the founder of iSpark Change. And what I do on a regular basis through my coaching is I help entrepreneurs looking for clarity and guidance eliminate the roadblocks that are preventing their personal and professional success, so they can infuse instant growth into their business while um, making an impact in the world, making a difference and spreading positive change. So that's a very important component for me. But at the heart, I mean, business and professional coach. I work with individuals. I work with groups. I work in a large mastermind. I work one on one with clients, and this one of the ways that I touch people. In addition to writing and speaking and things as well.
That's awesome. And so, when you speak, what do you speak on? What's a typical? Do you have a couple of speeches, or do you speak on the topic where the organizers ask you for a certain specific thing, or what is that like? Because I'm a speaker
Yeah, that's
myself, so I'm curious.
No, it's great because speaking is something that is near and dear to my heart that I've been doing a lot more of in the past year, and want to continue to grow that. So I speak on a few topics. One is about creating purpose in your life, because that's something that has really had an impact on me, where things changed for me a few years ago, and how I created was able to create my purpose and really live my purpose on a daily basis. Um, I'll also speak on the effects of social impact in business, how social impact has an effect on every business, large and small, whether entrepreneurs see it or not. And that's really changed in the past couple of years. And then sometimes it's just a motivational presentation, on motivation and mindset, and how to unleash that power that we all have inside, and how to be the best version of ourselves. Reach that ultimate success, which is what I like coaching people on.
What
But
do you think?
I'm open.
What do you think is the block or blocks that prevent people from unleashing their potential or what they have inside, or what you just mentioned?
Ooh, I'd say, Tatiana, that it all starts up here in the mindset. I always start with mindset for everyone I coach, whether they want just specifics, specific coaching about the growth of their business, or individual coaching. I always start with where their head is at, so to speak, because that's where their success is going to be determined. It goes back to the old saying from Henry Ford: if you think you can or think you can't, you're right in both instances. Because so often what I find are things like fear and limiting beliefs that are holding people back from success. And I'm able to coach them because those are things that held me back from success. Those are things that I learned along my entrepreneurial journey, is how to get past those limiting beliefs, how to overcome that fear, and see that I can accomplish great things, and I'm still working on that on a daily basis. And so it always starts with mindset, um, and then from there we can move on to what's really going to drive that mindset. So what are the goals that they have? What are the habits that they can create to translate into those goals, and the action steps, um, and that really can solidify getting to that success. And then you mix in there some coaching around communication, because that's essential to everything we do in life and business and leadership, because that's important to a business, and that really rounds out how I work with an entity or an individual.
And I'm just trying to dig a little deeper, and trying to. And this comes from a place of curiosity more than anything else. What is the limiting or number one limiting belief? What does that look like that you've seen through your work with clients through over the years? What has that been specifically, and how can someone, let's say, listening, say, "Oh, I share the belief. Damn it."
Yeah. I'd say at its simplest form, Tatiana, the limiting belief is that they can't accomplish something that they're seeking to accomplish. Hey, I want to make $1 million in my business. Hey, I want to, grow my business from 5 people to 50 people, or I want to, lose 30 pounds. I mean, I coach CrossFit as a hobby and have for 11 years. And so, I coach people in different areas, not just in business and life, but in, sport as well. And, and so it doesn't matter what the goal, but what happens is people, they just don't have a lack of belief that they can accomplish it. And before they have that belief in themselves, nothing they can do, they will self-sabotage, they will, work on the wrong things, and it will prevent them. And oftentimes where that's coming from is that they are trying to live as the person they are now, but want to accomplish the goal, which will require them to be someone else down the road. So, in order to accomplish a goal, you have to live into the person that you need to be to accomplish that goal. So, Jim Rohn used to say, don't have a goal to make $1 million because of the money. You have a goal to make $1 million because of the person you become along the road to making that $1 million. And that's obviously 30 years ago he said that quote. So maybe in today's math it's 10 million. But the point remains that that they're stuck in that identity that they have for themselves, or that they've always had, whether it's identity of lack, and that's where I was, right? Identity of scarcity and lack, and not seeing myself outside of that bubble, and then it becomes something that limits you, right? You can't get outside the bounds of that bubble. And once people can see themselves as that future self, that version 2.0, better version of themselves, then we can start creating those goals and those habits that are going to get them to become that individual.
That's awesome. As part of my marketing materials, we actually send out this Jim Rohn's
Nice.
book of quotes to people. It fits in nicely into an envelope, and you can put a little card like this in there. There is some information. There's the dedication page. It's really, actually, really, really cool. Something I learned from my coach.
Yeah, that's
But
perfect. I love it. I'm going to need to get one of those treasury of quotes. He's
yeah,
got so many great ones. Oh my gosh, so many great ones.
and I've had people call me and say, Tatiana, and this goes out to prospective clients and whatever, and people would call and say, he's been my sort of mentor, not officially, but I followed him through the years, and he was really great, and I really liked him, and now you send me this book of quotes, so this is awesome, and so I've had really great response to this. So I keep doing that because I think that it's some of his quotes will live forever.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, if we turn back time a little bit, or sit in a time machine and go back in time, what was your career path like? Where did you start, and how did you become an entrepreneur? What was that path like?
Well, that's a bit of a tale, but I will share it with you. I'll make it succinct. But I started in corporate, as a lot of people. I worked in the healthcare field. I started, early on in my career in sales in healthcare, and kind of worked my way up the ladder from sales to management and training and corporate development. And after about 20 years in that space, um, I ventured into the startup world. Which is what actually brought, relocated me and my family, from California, where we resided, to Texas. We moved to Texas in 2009, and that was coming to work with a startup here in Houston. And it was a healthcare startup, but it's just growing and expanding. And I had always, while I had worked in corporate, I had always felt that I was kind of destined for more, so to speak, right? That I never grew up with entrepreneurial parents, or studied that or anything like that. But I always felt like, man, it'd be great to own my own business. And then going through the startup world, I worked for one startup and then a second one, and saw, us go from, nothing to, kind of shoot through to the sky very quickly, and high eight figures, with both of them. And I had a big role in each of them, that I got a real taste of what it was like to build and grow a business. And I took all of that in 2015. After the second one, I had gone from being the executive VP of sales of our first company to being the CEO of a second company that we had acquired and the executive VP at the same time for 9 months, which was a balancing act that I would not wish upon anyone. And it became too much. And we started having some regulatory issues, and I decided to leave our company at that time. And as I'm, this is the end of 2015, and as I'm kind of figuring out my next step, I had people contacting me, offering me jobs, right? Oh, hey, you helped build this company. Why don't you come build ours? And one thing I knew at that point is I had just gone through, years of this, kind of up and down roller coaster, like an entrepreneurial roller coaster. And I was like, I don't want that anymore for someone else. I want that for myself. So I decided to work with some of these companies that wanted to hire me as a coach, as a consultant. And that's where it really started, at the end of 2015. And, I launched right away with a few big clients, and it was, it was great right away. However, there's always the but, right? However, those weren't really, I had to learn over time that, you don't just take a client because they're going to pay you a bunch of money, right? You want the right kind of client. You don't just want someone that, is wants to hand you a check. And, I went through about 9, 10 months later, I went through a big downturn period on my journey where I fired one client, another one stopped, couldn't find some new ones to that level, and my revenues just plummeted. And it was a very challenging time for about 6 months of trying to, what did I really want? And because it was so easy. Like I got those clients day one. And so it was so easy. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I could do this. And then all of a sudden, the wheels fell off the cart. And I was like, oh boy, where do I go now? But I decided to stick it out. I didn't waver. I decided to stick it out. I had to, dip into retirement savings and things like that, but I stuck it out and was able to make it work. And now here we are years later, and I started a second company, which I can explain, but I'm fully an entrepreneur. I mean, I wouldn't do anything else, and will be one for the rest of my career.
What would you do differently if you could go back in time and into that transition from corporate to business, basically to being your own boss? What would you, if anything, do differently?
I don't like to think of how what would I do differently, because I learn from every situation. I learn from every experience and think that
I
those help me to
understand.
get to where I am, yeah, where I am today. I would say that I would be one thing that I would tell my younger self is to be more cautious with the clients that you take on. So, as I said, my very first client, I mean, they were paying me, a 5-figure, monthly fee to be their consultant, which is great when you're starting out a new business, right? To have that as your first client, and the second client was pretty close to that, and it was like, hey, that's great, but it's not all about the money. So I would tell my younger self, look, it's not about the money, it's about having the right clients, which, as I said, I had to learn over time.
Yeah, I think we all, as coaches, as advisors, we all learn the hard way. Unfortunately, for some reason, we don't learn from the mistakes of others, because when we're just growing the business, we feel like, the client's paying money, we're going to make it work, we're going to, whatever. And I've certainly had that lesson throughout my career, throughout my business career. But I think that we all, for some reason, and maybe that's just an experience that we all have to go through in person, like we have to do it ourselves as opposed to learn from the mistakes of others.
Yeah.
But I've certainly seen, at least from an accountant's perspective, I've seen all accountants go through the same thing when they get liberated and start their own things. Um, and then I think that, I don't know, I mean, that thing that happened where you fired a client, I think, to me, it sounds like it was a blessing in disguise, because, accountants are known for, and I jokingly call it S&M, because they're miserable, but they like it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they don't do anything about it. They don't do anything to change it. Um, and I think we almost never, at least most traditional accountants, almost never get to the point where they realize, oh, there's shitty clients and there's good clients. We can actually choose. Like we can actually say no to the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just doesn't happen for accountants a lot. And there's a generation of progressive accountants, but which and things are different there. But for traditional, and still those progressive or progressive wannabe accountants still struggle with the concept of, what do you mean I have to say no to the money and not take on a client? Well, I found out this year that it's really hard for me to work with women as clients. And it's not
See.
because I'm a bad person or I'm a bad coach, but it's often because women look at me and sort of almost compete.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or compete in their mind. Maybe they don't realize it. I have a business and I've built a business around the family and stuff like that. And also, many women, we're all in our own heads. Men don't spend time thinking, oh, that's because I'm a Libra or whatever. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
women do, and so I think that we're also women. A lot of women are also unhappy, and whenever it's a happy woman working with me, we have a great relationship. When it's an unhappy woman, which has been the case for most of my clients that have taken on women, they're unhappy, then there will come a time where they will refuse to take responsibility for their own business, for their own actions in their business, and will
Mm-hmm.
point fingers. And eventually, that pointing fingers will come at you, one way or the
Yeah.
other. So I don't know. That's been my experience. So I think you made a great point there. And if you
Yeah.
see
It's
me
interesting.
clacking on my keyboard, I'm taking some notes. So
Cool.
yeah, but were there anything that when you started being your own boss that you really enjoyed? Anything that was a good surprise?
You know, that's a great question. I had worked. I mean, being in sales and being in the different positions I had always worked autonomously on my own, right? Home office, on the road, things like that. So I always had a lot of freedom, which is a big thing for entrepreneurs that I work with. That all of a sudden they have that freedom, right?
Yeah,
And with that is a blessing and a curse, because for some people you're too free and then you don't end up not doing work. But for me, I had been used to it for so much, so that it worked well for me. I would say, um, I would say something that that I really appreciated was just being valued for my work, because people saw that. I remember in corporate there was a time where I was at a certain level, not at the top, but somewhere in the middle, and you have all these ideas. I was always my brain is always on. I'm someone that has hundreds of ideas a day, but if you look at my personality test, but I'm someone that has a lot of ideas, and so when you're in that level of like a middle level of corporate, your ideas only go so far, right? They have to
yeah,
be approved by others. Things don't happen, things don't get done. But when you're your own boss, then hey, I can act on this idea. Or you're consulting someone else and they're like, oh my gosh, you have the answer. That's a great idea. And they love it and they run with it and they have success. And so, seeing all those ideas and those, um, steps for growth that I had, being put into practice, that's very rewarding.
yeah, for sure. And I'm curious, what personality test are you referring to?
I'm referring to the Discovery Insights personality test. It's there's the Enneagrams and the DISC, and there's so many. This one's
Yeah,
considered the most accurate in terms of face validity by the people that go through this process. And when I was at a big corporation, healthcare corporation, I got certified to teach it, to train others in it, and learned inside out of this personality assessment. And it was something that they did for all their people that were in the corporate training department, which I was a part of
that's
at that
nice.
time. Um, but very in depth. You get this big book, and then there's a 2-page summary. And when you read that 2-page summary, you think that they were inside your head when they when they wrote it. You think that that they had access to, your parents and your significant other and, everyone ever close to you, because they have every detail nailed down, and it's all just from the assessment.
That's cool. I just thought maybe it was Enneagram, and I just recently got trained in it. I mean, I've done. I'm familiar with the SRT, which disc is based off of, um, and the Enneagram. I've just recently got trained in it, just for myself, and also just I believe in these personality tests because there's a lot you can tell about a certain type of personality, especially if they work for you. There's McQuaig. McQuaig is one of the oldest ones. They date back to like 1950s. I really like that one. Like that one is exactly what you said. It's like they're in your head. And when you know, kind of, you can set parameters for four different, I guess, indicators. And if the person fails to be in that within that range, then it's a problem. So
Mm-hmm.
really cool stuff. But I totally like Enneagram. I'm number 3. Do you know your score at all, or no?
I'm sorry, I don't. I mean, it's been so long since I've done that one. I'm sorry, I just don't remember.
That's fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it tells a lot. Like to me, because I know I'm a 3. Like I'm every coach's dream because I always implement. I listen. I do what you tell me to do. That kind of stuff. Like I feel bad not doing something, so I really am hyper responsible and very. I like reaching new heights and stuff. And usually I motivate myself, so I don't really need anybody to motivate me, which is cool. But there's definitely what I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed that too, in your practice. And I'm curious because this is the question that I've been, I don't want to say agonizing about, but more like thinking about, like how do you actually do it? There are people, a lot of people in the slightly younger than I am generation. Like my sister is about 10 years younger, and my sister, my nephew, there's a couple of other people, and I think my sister is less of a representative because she is motivated in some parts. But there are people, I've hired accountants for my clients and things like that, staff accountants. And what I've noticed is this younger, slightly younger generation, like they're in their early 30s, let's say, um, they don't have an internal motivation. They don't
Mm.
really want anything. And so I'm curious to know if you've ever come across that in your practice. And also, if you have, how do you even deal with that? How do you help the person motivate themselves?
Yeah, it's so true. And one thing I've done in the past couple of years is study generational differences, because as I transition to working more with millennials and Gen Z, it's different. You have to interact with them different than Gen X, which I'm a part of, or even baby boomers. And I'd say that in individuals like that, I tend to stay away from folks like that in my one-on-one coaching, because I
Same.
evaluate them, and it's they have to have a growth mindset. They have to be willing to grow and be motivated, or else I'm just not going to work with them. But I do get some people in groups. I do get some people in groups that are like that. And what the way that I help them is to focus on making things as small and attainable as possible. So if, going back to what I said a few minutes ago about, having this big goal and, not seeing yourself as accomplishing that big goal, right? As a person
Mhm.
who's accomplishing that big goal. The other side of that, Tatiana, is having this big goal and thinking it's too big and unattainable. It's like, how am I going to climb Mount Everest? Right. Well, you don't climb it by going from the bottom to the top. You climb it one step at a time. Right. And it may take a week, but you just one step at a time. And so what I like to do is break it down to just that first step, that next step. Um, and make it just so ultra simple that it takes all the thinking out. It takes all the procrastination out. If I was trying to get someone to read, it's like, hey, just open the book, right? Not read 10 pages, right? Or read for 30 minutes. No, just open the book and just open it. And then, you'll look at it, you'll start getting going, and, you get some interest and you go from there. Um, but when you make it ultra small like that, because what happens is, if you, you know, having some success. So I'll relate it because this is a great analogy for, for anyone to understand is, in the gym is working out. Okay. If you go and you tell someone, you're like, hey, we're going to squat, 200 pounds and they've never worked out a day in their life, or we're going to bench press, 200 pounds, they won't be able to do it, or they'll do something that you want to do. They'll be so sore. They won't want to come back. They're just totally lose motivation and say, forget it, I'm done. But if you give them a small win, you give them something small that they can accomplish and they have success, then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, I like that. That's going to feed into that confidence. And then they're going to say, oh, I want to have another small win and another small win and another small win. And then before you know it, they're squatting 200 pounds, right? Or they're benching 200 pounds because they've done it, small, small iterations over time, and they've gotten there. And so it's not climbing to the top of a mountain. It's just that first step. And that's the best way that I've found to build motivation in people that aren't internally motivated. And I did write, so I write for Lifehack, and I did write 2 articles, one on internal motivation and one on external motivation. So, people can look that up if they want, but it explains both, and, the differences and examples and everything.
That's
And I
cool.
guess, I'm sorry, it's not internal, it's intrinsic and extrinsic instead of internal and external, intrinsic and
Cool.
extrinsic. That's how it's titled.
Awesome. And thanks for sharing that. Makes it easily Googleable. I mean, sure, right?
Oh yeah, if you just type in like intrinsic motivation, Rick Ornelas, or life hack, I'm sure it should pop up. I don't remember the
Cool.
exact title, but for each one, but it's been about a year. But
And do you think, just an interesting, as a for me as a coach, as a advisor, I guess, do you think that people could, if they're not internally motivated, that they could change, or do you think they'll never, like, they won't change, at least in the nearest future? Meaning, you mentioned that you don't, like, you test them out of the one-on-one coaching. You figure it
Mhm.
out, and you're like, no, I'm not offering you the coaching, whatever, whatever your process is. But I'm curious to know if, like, if you like, I've had this business coach, a couple of years ago that we worked together. He's actually in Dallas, Dallas based, and I remember he used to say you have to be coachable. And I feel
Mhm.
like for some people, not all, for some people, it was that spark that ignited them being coachable. Like, were not coachable before, but him saying that you have to be coachable so that you can have, I don't know, success or whatever that was in the program. Um, do you feel like it's possible for them to change on their own, and for us to do that fairly quickly as coaches, or no?
So you're saying for them to change without a coach,
Like,
or
if, let's say, they're having a discovery call with you as a coach, and you know
okay?
that they're not the right person, like not the right client for you, by you saying, you have to be coachable and you have to commit to excellence, you have to do X, Y, and Z, only then we can start working together. If you do that, do you think that that could be enough of a push for them to change, to find that motivation somehow?
It can be. I'd say it could be depending on the individual. So if the person, if they are really, you know, um, vested in a goal per se, and they see working with me is going to help them achieve this goal, then they will make the change. They will make the change because they'll see that it's an end to, a means to an end, right? That it's going to get them there. Now, if they're just kind of like halfway in, kind of wishy-washy, then it doesn't matter what I say because they're not going to do it anyways. And so one thing I tell everyone when they start, if they're going to coach with me, and this is something that one of my mentors told me when I started in coaching, is I tell them, I say, look, and having experience in this, it's easy, but I say, I am going to be like a personal trainer. I'm not going to be your bartender. Okay. A personal trainer is going to get in your face. They're going to hold you accountable. They're going to push you. They're going to make you uncomfortable. They're going to force you to grow and expand beyond your comfort zone. A bartender is just going to smile and keep you happy, make sure your drink is topped off, and you have some peanuts and everything, and you're just pat you on the back and say, oh yeah, you're all good, you're taken care of. But that does nothing to help that individual, right? It does nothing, or it helps them for 5 minutes, and that's useless. So I have that conversation. It's a very frank and honest conversation with everybody when we start working. And I've had people that especially in the CrossFit coaching, I've had, and one story stands out from a middle-aged woman who wasn't very strong when she started, not very big, a small stature and everything. And she had been coached by one of the other coaches who's a far, and I'm not an aggressive coach by any means, but this other person doesn't push them as hard, right? Doesn't push them as much. But I push people that I feel can do more, right? And to get outside that comfort zone, because I know they can do it. Well, this person, I would push her, and then she totally changed. She became really strong and fast and and a great athlete, right? And she told me after probably about, I don't know if it was maybe a year of me coaching her. She said she comes to me one day, and I think we were at I think it wasn't even in class. I think it was like like we were having a potluck or some kind of outside of class activity. And she says, Coach Rick, I've been meaning to tell you something. And she tells me, she said, when you first started coaching here, I hated your class. I hated it because you were so different from the other coaches, because you pushed me and you made me get uncomfortable. And, I always hated it. But then I stuck with it, and now you're my favorite coach. And I love how you've pushed me and how much I've grown, and, how strong I've become, and, where I am now because of your coaching. And that's what I'm looking for. You don't have to get it, so to speak, at day one. You just have to be open, right? You just have to be open and say, all right, I'm going to go along for the ride. You're the coach. You know what you're doing. And that's how she was, right? She didn't enjoy it, but she says, hey, I'm here. I'm going to make the best of it. And then now she's great. And I remember we had this competition, and she had the best score of anyone. And I was really pushing her in that competition. And I told her beforehand, I'm like, you're going to get the highest score of anybody. And she did, and I would say that the person that was, a year prior never would have done that. Never in a million years. But because she had grown so much, she did.
That's great. I mean, I could totally relate. And I was having a flashback to my second accounting class, which was completely new for me. The second accounting teacher, first class, she was like threatening us and stuff. And I was like, maybe I should switch to another section. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to stick around. And then I ended up actually taking 5 classes with her, 5 different accounting classes. And I aced each and every one of them. And I'm a better accountant because of her too. So I could totally relate. And I was having flashbacks as you were talking.
Yeah, it's true, right? It's true, because, it's that's where the growth happens. That's where the magic happens. It doesn't happen in that comfortable bubble.
Yeah, for sure. So Rick, as we wrap up here for today, do you have, and if you don't remember 3, that's okay. Do you have top 3 books that have either changed your life or changed your thinking or changed you in some way that are basically forever your go-to or forever your, I guess, resource
Yep.
in your life, whether business or any type of book?
Yes, I do for sure. And I'll share. I mean, I have a lot more than 3. I'm a voracious reader. I'll read a couple books a month at least, but right now I'm reading 3 books at the same time. But as far as the 3, and this would be in this order. Number 1 would be Mindset by Carol Dweck. And Mindset is, just a great foundational book. She talks about, she's a researcher out of Stanford, and she talks about her, a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and how that relates to parenting or coaching or, business or different situation, and how it shows up. And that has impacted my life and my business probably more than any others. Okay. So that'd be number 1. Number 2, uh, would be The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And that it's such a simple book. What he breaks down is what I described earlier in this interview about breaking things down into those small little tiny bits. And what he says is small, seemingly insignificant um, steps that will compound over time to massive results. And I've implemented the compound effect in my life and my career, so that's a great one as well. And the third one would be Limitless by Jim Kwik. Limitless, brain coach Jim Kwik, if you're familiar. But his book from a couple years ago, he talks about just how we essentially, with the power of our brain and our mind, we are all limitless if we allow ourselves to be, and in different capacities. And that's something that I've really embraced in the past couple years since I read it, and that I continue to impart into those that I coach.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I've written down, hopefully I got the names right. I'm sure people can find them. I've written them down so that you can find them in the show notes and below the video if you're watching on YouTube. Awesome. And Rick, so actually two more things that I would like for you to share. Number one is, who would be describe an ideal client? Meaning, if someone is listening as you describe that ideal client and they think, this is me, who would that person be? An ideal client for you to coach?
Oh, that's a great question. Ideal client for me, and I love that you asked it, so thank you. An ideal client would be an entrepreneur that has a business already. So not a new entrepreneur, but they have a business. Maybe they've been in business for, let's say a minimum of 2 to 3 years, and they've had some success. So, like on my Instagram, for example, it says 6 to 7 figure entrepreneurs, because, what who I work with are people that they kind of hit those glass ceilings. So, someone will start their business and they'll get to, 100,000 or 120. And then they're like, why can't I grow beyond this? Or they get to 500,000 and they're like, why can't I grow beyond, that mark, or 1 million? And how can I get past 1 million? And they stagnate. And so those are my clients. They're at those kind of different, benchmarks in their business where they have a business, and it can be service or, sales type based business. It doesn't really matter, but just an entrepreneur. It can be a brick and mortar. I've worked with lots of, healthcare providers and doctors and so forth, but they can be a solo entrepreneur. They can have a team, but they've stagnated. They're looking to grow. They're looking to figure out what is keeping them back from growing their business and what steps they need to take to go to that next level. And it can be male, female, like I said, typically they're going to be, millennial, Gen X, I've worked with a few Gen Zs, but typically they're in that demographic. But
Awesome. And last question is, where can people find and connect with you? I mean, the links that you've submitted will be listed in the show notes, below the video, below the podcast as well. But is there one place where you predominantly live? And if there is, then share it. If not, then we'll just have all the links available for everybody.
yeah, a couple places. So the two websites would be rickornelas.com, where it's all about me, my speaking, my writing, my interviews, and then also isparkchange.com to learn more about my organization, where we empower others to connect with humanity and spread positive change and elevate social impact. So those two websites, and then the same would go for Instagram. We have a very active Instagram, Rick Ornelas Instagram or iSparkChange Instagram. So they can follow us, where they'll see daily motivational, inspirational content. They'll find out about different programs we have going on, different speaking events, things like that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rick, for being a great guest. It was really cool and interesting to talk to you and to learn about you and your journey and your coaching and the work that you do. So thanks so much for agreeing to come on the show.
Yes, it's been a pleasure, Tatiana. Thank you very much for having me on the show. You asked some great questions, and we had a great conversation. So thank you.
Awesome. If you're listening or watching, tune in next Friday for another great episode of Talk to Tatiana, and bye for now.